Hey everyone, welcome to our Difference Makers webinar series where we're focusing on spotlighting people and organizations focused on driving a culture of innovation around the industry. Today we have Mandi Wooledge, who is President and COO of Decision Logic, a restaurant software company focused on saving restaurants time and money, allowing them to focus on their restaurant patrons. Before we get started, just a quick reminder that if you miss an insight or you'd like to go back and revisit the webinar, don't worry, we're going to have a link sent directly to your inbox. And with that, let's do this. Hi, Mandi, how are you?
I'm great, Steve. How are you?
This is awesome. We've worked together for a few years now, and I'm excited to be able to learn more about you and Decision Logic and share that with some of our webinar participants. So
Awesome.
if you wouldn't mind to kick us off, just tell us a little bit of the background of yourself and the Decision Logic story.
Absolutely. Well, for starting with myself, my name is Mandi. Obviously, I'm at Decision Logic now. I've been with the company for around 10 years. And prior to that, I was a restaurant operator. I think I started off waiting tables in the restaurant business when I was like 13 years old. It was the very first job that I had. And I worked at this tiny little cafe in the small town that I worked at, we lived in. And at that time, when I first started, this cafe was so small, we did everything. Anywhere from washing our own dishes. Sometimes we flipped the pancakes, but it was all about making sure that the guests in our town were guests inside this diner, which was called after someone's grandmother. It was their kitchen. So because of that, it was really like inviting somebody into your home and making sure that you were taking care of them. My late brother-in-law had told me at the time that as long as I kept smiling and kept people's drinks full, I'd make a lot of money. And I took that to heart. And at 13 years old, I could pull down $80 on a Saturday. And that was huge. That was huge. And so at that point, I really fell in love with the restaurant business. I fell in love with that hospitality. I fell in love with taking care of people and leaving things better than I found them. So that was something that really resonated with me. As I moved to Lincoln, Nebraska to go to school, I ended up waiting tables at this restaurant. My brother had already waited tables there before. I was really hesitant about going into the same spot that he was at because I didn't want to be Adam's little sister. But I did really enjoy working with all the people that were there. I remember my very first day, it was very, very busy. And the whole point of that shift was to see if you could keep up with your trainer. And I remember walking away that second day of training going, I'm going to run this place someday.
There you go.
So I started working there, worked my way all the way through college, got my degree in business management, and ended up managing several of those concepts that were attached to that restaurant. Later, we ended up adopting Decision Logic as our back office system to help manage our food costs and manage our labor costs.
So at first you were a consumer of Decision Logic.
I was an end user. That's right. So we used the system, and at that time, I helped to oversee the other bar locations of the other restaurants that we had. And I had been trained up through the ranks to do that. So sometimes I would look into the beverage cost of other locations, so that above store reporting. But I was also the GM of one specific location. So I really dug into the food cost of that location. Now, one of the things I like to tell people about this is that we grew that business in 2007. And we did that during the recession. And at that time, that was one of the hardest hit recessions that we had had since the Great Depression. I mean, this last year definitely beats that year, but that year was really tough for us. And if I hadn't had a system to be able to dig into that variance and that cost to be able to manage that, there's no way that concept would have stayed alive. And so really being able to treat the business like being a subcontractor of that and digging into those numbers, really finding where our inefficiencies were from an operations perspective was critical to the growth of that particular concept. And so the story kind of goes, my husband and I had kids while we were doing that. I had 2 babies while we were running that restaurant. And at that time frame, I got really tired of not ever seeing my kids. My mom and his mom were both raising those kids. And although I feel like they did an okay job, it was my turn. So when I got an opportunity to come and work for the Decision Logic team after I had left that, obviously we don't make a habit of going and stealing our customers support staff members, but I had left and I went and did something else for a little while, and I got tapped by Decision Logic to come and start an account management department here. And in that time frame, I was really excited about that because I saw a lot of the benefits that the system had, and I was really excited to come onto the team. So that's kind of how my story went. Been here for 10 years, have been through the transition to Aviture and really love helping people. That's my why factor. That's why I get out of bed in the morning. I love helping restaurateurs, restaurant operators, restaurant companies to really streamline their operations, find those efficiencies, work less hard, be more profitable. And right now is another time frame in which we can't do it without technology. We've got to be able to have these systems in place to help people pinch those pennies. There's an age old adage in the restaurant space that sales fixes most things. And when you are high on sales and you got lines out the door, it's easier to look past some of those inefficiencies or some of those areas where you might be not saving the most money that you can. But in times of recession or in times when labor costs are going up or commodities are going up, you have to pinch every single penny. And so really helping to unlock that potential in the groups that we work with is something that I really thrive on.
That's great, Mandi. Thank you. Thank you for that background. I think it sets us up well to start to dig in on how Decision Logic, and specifically you and your involvement with Decision Logic, has driven innovation. One of the words that I heard you say quite a bit was growth. And so positioning yourself for personal career growth, but also positioning the companies that you worked for, even starting with that, the 13-year-old restaurant involvement. Really interesting concept to focus on growth. And I'm going to take a leap and say that the growth that you desired required innovation. Could you tell us?
Absolutely.
Could you connect those two dots, growth and innovation, for us?
Absolutely. So Decision Logic, as a business, started back in like 1998. And in that process, the team was really looking to help get results to the C-suite faster. And in that process, Jim and John Barber, two brothers that started the company, really were the tech behind that. They started by first, setting up the infrastructure, trying to make sure that they could work through their processes that they already had. And they were kind of just trying to make that better. Turns out they started from scratch, really started working innovatively to try to help get those results faster. Then they started really interviewing the field, talking to restaurant managers, what's your food cost? And then coming back and seeing what their food cost is. And then them asking, is that good or is that bad? And they're like, well, it's better than last week. So that's good, right? They're like, I don't know. You tell us, what's it supposed to be? So they really started to get into, theoretical versus actual and really deep diving into lots of different reports. And we really focus on making restaurant operators and restaurateurs be able to achieve exceptional outcomes through data-driven decisions. And so you're right, that does take a lot of innovation. And through that time frame, they really worked and were able to figure out that the concept that they were working for could have results outside of the space that they were in, and they started to sell it to other customers. Now, customers have unique needs in every business that we work with, right? That's the same at Aviture, whether it's at Decision Logic, and each restaurant is a little bit unique. And so trying to make sure that you can use innovation to solve a business case that applies to multiple groups versus, pinpointing one edge case or one use case that maybe doesn't resonate with everybody else. And so that's one of the areas in which we tackle things. Now, we employed Aviture at some point. I think it was around 2013, because we wanted a way to use innovation to make some of this data tell a story. We wanted it to be a little bit more useful for the groups that were using our system, to not just be looking at a spreadsheet or a wall of data, to be able to make those decisions and have those exceptional outcomes. So we tapped Aviture to build us some dashboards with some key performance indicators and things that would be more visually appealing to tell that story. We also had them work with us to help develop some mobile applications. So the mobile applications being able to be a more easy to use place for data entry, and not so much of the duplicate writing things down on a piece of paper and then taking it and entering it into a computer. So that's where it really started to evolve, that relationship with Aviture, is to be able to say, like, how can we make this system operational friendly while still using innovation to eliminate this double dipping, these touch it more than once? Because in the restaurant space, you got to touch it once and leave it alone. So there was a lot of different steps as far as that's concerned. Now, fast forward a little bit, Aviture ends up purchasing Decision Logic and helping us take things to the next level. So we really brought the system and the team up into the 21st century and started to solve real business case. I'd say that there was probably maybe a handful of times where we really developed a couple of things that were too unique for a couple of our customers. Not to say that we don't still solve their business case, but we're trying to hit that broader audience to be able to do some of those things. And the interaction with Aviture has changed that playing field for us. Really seeking to understand the business case that we're trying to solve. Really trying to understand what the problem is and not necessarily that a box needs to go here or something needs to generate right there. It really helped us to expand the tools and the solutions that the system can offer, including things like operational tools for managers, being able to be HACCP compliant in their sites, taking things to that way more mobile first approach has been a big driver for us here over the last couple of years.
Excellent, excellent. So a 10-year history with Decision Logic, and I've heard actually multiple times recently, don't listen to what I say, watch what I do. And so over the past 10 years, can you talk, you guys have gone through some major transitions,
We have.
rebrandings, major feature releases and pivots. You'd already mentioned the switch to mobile. So can you just kind of talk about in your recollection, some of the major milestones and innovation leaps that you've taken over the past 10 years?
Oh yeah. I mean, there's quite a few of them to call out. So I would say that first and foremost, when I came on to Decision Logic as a team member, we were really, really small. We had two support people. We had one project manager, one account manager. We had one salesperson, and we had a small room full of developers. When Aviture ended up taking over Decision Logic, we invested heavily in the people and the product. So the first major change that happened with that was not only the rebranding, but streamlining systems that were happening in the background. We switched from a waterfall approach, which is huge releases at a time and no customer feedback, to the agile development cycle where we work in those 2-week sprints. We take multiple iterations on a product, get feedback from customers, and really entertain more of that user-centered approach to making sure that development's happening the way that's going to be the best absorbed by the groups that we work with. So I'd say that would probably be the first one. The second one is we really changed the look and feel of the product. And like I said, it used to just be walls of data, glorified spreadsheets put up on paper. And now we have more tools that have visually inspiring things that go along with them. Recipe management was the first one that really came to mind with Aviture. And that was we started to manage our recipes in a spot where people could not only get the depletion that needs to come from their theoretical or ideal usage, but also photos of what the end result's supposed to look like, step-by-step instructions to go into that, the divvying up of those products in prepped items versus menu items, all in one centrally located spot. But the ability for a corporate location that has many franchise groups across the country to make an update to a recipe and have that push out real time was a really big deal. Now,
Definitely.
other things that happened with that bigger milestones were our adoption of handling multiple fiscal calendars inside of our site. Typically we would make everybody adopt the franchisor's calendar, and we don't do that anymore. And so that was a really big release for our team. It was something that we wanted to tackle for a really long time. And being able to handle that now gives our group so much more flexibility to support their franchise communities and allow them to see metrics their way. And then the last part about that, I would say that was a big challenge and that we needed to innovate past was through this whole COVID situation. Um, Restaurant industry was one of the hardest industries hit in this entire pandemic. I think when I originally started waiting tables, I was like, this is always something we can fall back on. We will always be able to eat. Everybody's got to eat. They're never going to shut down restaurants. I think I probably said those words at 13. And lo and behold, it happened. And I never thought I'd see that day. So the fact that we were able to support our restaurants through innovation through this was amazing. So the team rallied. We created a brand new app for our stores to be able to see and measure how stores were doing. It was literally touch and go for quite a few of our concepts. Had several locations that if they dipped $1 below this level, they were going to have to temporarily close until they could get things back up and running. And the ability for our team to pivot quickly and in 5 weeks crank out an app for people to monitor their sales that fast was was really game changing for us. One of our teammates that our partners that works with us said that it's still the first thing that he looks at when he gets out of bed in the morning is he rolls over and pulls open that app and makes sure that he knows who he needs to get in front of today.
Outstanding. Yeah, that's great. Another consistent theme through those milestones and pivots and leaps of innovation is, you mentioned it earlier, is just this willingness to constantly ask questions and to dig deeper, and not just, you got the line out the door, the sales are good, we can handle some inefficiencies. You guys don't rest on that. You guys are constantly asking, what else can we do to give more accurate information, to have the data tell a story, right? So that the users of the system aren't making mental gymnastics and those types of things. You're constantly asking how we can make this better, leave it better than you found it, you said earlier. So
Absolutely.
I really appreciate that. That's great. What's kind of the next big innovation that you guys are tracking, if you're able to share? Like, what's on the horizon for Decision Logic?
Absolutely. I kind of teased about it from the beginning, but we're really looking forward to our mobile first approach. It's something that's been at the forefront of our minds for quite some time. And the ability for our end users to do as many of the tasks that they can from their mobile app instead of in the back office computer. You know, I know that you've been to a lot of restaurants, Steve, and I know you've had some background a little bit, but it's like when you get promoted in a restaurant, it's usually because you came up from within the ranks, and you don't get promoted because you're good at spreadsheets and you're good at entering things into a computer and because you're good at sitting in the office on your backside. You get promoted because you're great with the guests, you're great with the staff, you're great with the food. You constantly are training and you're charismatic, why would we take that person out of what they do best every day and make them go sit on our program in a back office area? We want them to be able to do their data entry from the app. We want them to be able to, double check the things that they need to check and start to prescribe some of the things that they should do. So you thought this was going to happen. It's not happening. This is happening now. You should make a step. You should consider doing these things. So that mobile first functionality, not only just predictive analytics, but start to get into that prescriptive analytics is something that's on the forefront for us.
That's exciting. Something else that you've shared with me previously is through the pandemic time period and Decision Logic's ability to have access to the restaurants, the restaurant owners and operators, the data flowing through those restaurants, but then the ability to innovate quickly and really pivot and help them out. What were some of the key observations of that data and that experience over the past year or so?
Yeah. So, first and foremost, everybody's model shifted. So, many of our restaurants had a really big focus on dine in. They'd had some to go orders. 3PD was third party delivery. Sorry, third party delivery is starting to really take off in the United States. And then when the pandemic happened, it was like all of their resources shifted to takeout and third party delivery. So that was the first thing that we noticed was, if they got to keep their doors open, it was through that process. Now, many of our concepts were already very well positioned to do takeout and third party delivery. Many of our groups were not. And so, really working with our teams, what we did was we started reaching out from our account management teams, really took the forefront of getting out there, calling on our customers, finding out, are you open? Are you safe? How's it going? What are your protocols that you're being asked to follow? Because it was different state by state, sometimes down to the municipality of what the protocol was that they were expected to follow. So we started reaching out to people. We started finding out who's doing what. How are you making those pivots? How are you repurposing areas of your restaurant to stage all of these takeout orders instead of using your dining room because you can't. So what we did is we put out a blog. And in our blog, we were talking through different operators, and people were submitting what's working in their area, how they're continuing to keep their doors open. And we made a platform for them to be able to do that. We also had team members that were researching state by state and other areas where if it came up in the news what the protocols were, we were publishing that on that same blog. So if you didn't know what was going on at one of your franchise locations, this set you up to be able to figure out what they needed to do differently. And then lastly, we really jumped all in. We helped some of our groups by being an extension of their operations team. Many of the office personnel went back into the restaurants to try to run things because they had to furlough some staff members. So we became an extension of their team with our concierge services, where, supply chain was really struggling and changing out products left and right. And we were on the backside, adding those to their order guides, making sure that those were in the front for them, and then making videos, because maybe some of the people in the office didn't know how to place an order in Decision Logic or didn't know how to take an inventory because it'd been so long since they'd done it. So we made some of that just-in-time videos for them to be able to pick up that stuff quickly and not skip a beat.
That's excellent. And a theme through that section there was innovation, not necessarily always coming from engineering, right? The theme that I'm picking up on is innovation is coming from passionate people that go all in, right? Those communities, obviously Decision Logic, innovation at its core, and a part of its history. And we really appreciate you sharing that with us today, Mandi. Appreciate, and we're excited to see all the exciting things that you guys are, where you're headed next, especially with your mobile first front. Before we wrap up, just a few quick rapid fire questions.
Sure.
First thing that comes to your mind when I ask you these questions, Mac or PC?
PC all the way.
All the way. Why is that?
So my brother and my sister all hound me about it. They really want me to switch to Mac, but I'm very comfortable with the Windows operating platform. I've been a Droid user since my very first smartphone. And it's just one of those things that I am efficient in the system because I know it so well. I don't like to think that I'm change averse, but I'm definitely not an early adopter. But I'm so comfortable with it and I feel so efficient and productive with it that's probably my stance on that.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it. All right. What emoji would you say comes up the most, either in instant messaging, Slack, text?
I think the crying, laughing emoji is probably my favorite.
Okay.
It can be used
straight down the side or the head tilted, like laughing, crying?
The straight down the side. And I feel like it can apply to so many things. Like, this is so bad or this is so great. I'm crying.
Right. Perfect. Okay. I don't think you're much of a sci-fi geek, but if you could have one piece of technology from like a TV movie or a book, what would it be? Like, you wished it was here today. You wish you had it in your hands.
I mean, I would totally take either R2-D2 or C3PO from Star Wars to just walk around and help me with the things that I need to get done. If I could have another mobile thing taking care of things right next to me that knew when I was going to pivot and how I was going to do it and ask me all the strange questions, that would add some spice to my life for sure.
There you go. Personal assistant. Eventually the robots will stop dancing and actually start performing helpful functions. But
I've heard that.
Until that day comes, we're going to have to keep helping ourselves here. Mandi, so exciting. And it's been such a huge pleasure to spend this time with you. Thank you so much for sharing you and your Decision Logic experience with us.
Thank you so much. And obviously thanks to Aviture, the art of the possible, and everything that you guys help bring to the table for us. I love the cross-pollination. I love the teamwork. So we'll keep cranking stuff out.
Excellent. And thank you for tuning in. We appreciate everyone that jumped on the webinar. A reminder, there's an email in your inbox that'll have a recording for safekeeping. And if you've got a question or you want to get in touch with us, you can feel free to email me at steve.miller@aviture.us.com or visit us on the web at aviture.us.com for additional content, resources, and more. Once again, just one last thank you. Wouldn't be difference makers without you, and it's been an absolute pleasure. You can find Decision Logic on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn, and also at decisionlogic.co. Keep an eye out for the next Difference Makers webinar coming to you in April. Stay tuned and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody.